This is Twisted Passages with award-winning author Marie Sutro. Now, let's take a deep dive into the dark world of psychological thrillers and meet the authors who created them.
Hello, and welcome to Twisted Passages. I'm your host, Marie Sutro, and today we have best-selling author Nina Laurin here to talk about her new release, The Last Thing She Saw. Welcome, Nina.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me today. Before we jump into this incredible story, can you start us off with an overview of what it's about?
Well, the last thing she saw, it's a small town mystery at heart. What happens is because of a flood, the heart of a small town gets destroyed. And in the wreckage of one of the houses, a body is discovered that has been there for more than 40 years. And that brings up all kinds of dark secrets that haunted the town ever since. And our protagonist, of course, is there to elucidate all that and discover some things about herself in the process.
Wonderful overview. There is nothing quite like finding a body in a house that nobody knew was there for 40 years. Where did the inspiration for the story come from?
Where I live, unfortunately, there was a big flood in 2019. And there was, since I live here, I kind of had a front row seat to all these horrible things that happened. It was very scary. And I guess that's how the writer brain copes with things like that. Like normal people go to therapy. Me, I just sit at my laptop and start inventing stuff. And I guess that's me processing all that. And there is also, not much of a spoiler to say that the mother-daughter relationship is at the heart of it all. And well, I also channeled some things from my own life and some things that I'd been thinking about. And I think it came together rather beautifully.
I think it did too. Your protagonist, Stephanie, she's coming home to investigate this. And she had left home and has been in the city for a while. And it seems like she thinks of herself as a city girl now. The setting is so vibrant, your little town of Marley. Was it hard to bring her back and have her have to now confront her own past as well as whatever this horrible mystery is around the body that's been discovered?
As you've probably noticed from the start, she has taken down quite a few notches. It's not her highest point in life that she's there. And she's really, really salty about it the whole time. And she's got a few lessons to learn in order to solve the mystery. It actually, her confronting her own personal flaws, it turns out to be the key. Without it, she would never manage to uncover what really happened.
You did it so well. The characters are so vibrant and so relatable, all of them. Again, getting back to that small town dynamic, the way that you played those sensibilities that folks in the city have about small town folks and that small town folks have about people in the city. Her reintegration to her hometown is difficult. And I was wondering, how did you get both of those settings so correct and those mindsets so correct?
Here's the thing. I am from a big city. I've always lived in a big city until just a few years ago. We moved here, to raise our family. And I must admit, I had some prejudices too about small towns and small town life. And I was very pleasantly surprised at how chill everybody actually is. Like chill and nice and helpful and great people all around. And that's when I was like confronted with my past notions of what it would be like and what the people would be like. And she really should know better. But, she left as a teenager. As a teenager, you're like, oh, screw everything. Well, and then she has to, it's a coming of age story, even though she's in her 30s and it's like way overdue. But it's a coming of age story. She must grow up over the course of the story.
And I loved that process for her. It's not easy in many ways. I actually felt sorry for her so many times because having to go back and see people you dated or your old bestie or whoever it is, that's an extremely awkward thing. And it seemed like a lot of the walls that were there, some were walls the other people had, but she has her own walls. Was it hard to dig in and find where the right spots and what the right triggers were to get her to start to reintegrate into her small town?
Well, she has quite a chip on her shoulder due to growing up very poor. And once again, in those small towns, I guess that's the downside. There are people there do have prejudices. And it's true that everybody talks. And it's true that you are you have a disadvantage before you've even gotten your start in life. And she has a big chip on her shoulder about that. But she comes back and she slowly comes to realize that things are not the way she remembers. And not just in the thriller suspense sense, like, hey, this person who I thought was nice is shady, or this shady person actually turns out to be nice. But in the actual, I was a dumb teenager and I had prejudices about everybody, and I need to confront them in order to move forward in my life, or at least at that point in my life. And well, there is the first person she doesn't encounter is her mom, who forgot to pick her up at the bus stop. Not a spoiler, it's in chapter 1. The second person she encounters is her ex, and that's the first major humbling moment. She's stuck in the rain at a gas station fast food place, and she's forced to accept the ride from him just to get back into town. And that's when we start to realize, okay, she says everybody there is such an asshole, but maybe she's not the most reliable narrator on that front. And I kind of just worked from that.
And I think it was so poignant. You just mentioned she left as a teenager. So those beliefs, oh, I think I feel like I'm an adult, so I must be an adult. And then having her go back in her 30s where she does read people different and she understands human behavior in a different way. It was very interesting, kind of that push-pull that you gave, where she's almost like a flower opening, but she's trying to pull those petals back closed.
She is.
Ways.
She's her own worst enemy.
Now, what's interesting about her coming back to dig into this case is that she's a journalist. How did you choose, and why did you choose to make her a journalist?
It was a thing that I wanted to do myself, and I almost did. I ended up doing creative writing instead. But I thought it was really ironic that somebody who is so completely blinkered, biased, and unwilling to look at reality would want to be a journalist. And she's told many times, maybe you failed because you weren't that good. And she's like, oh, and it turns out to be correct. She failed because, well, she had a lot to learn before she could go into that line of work, because it requires a level of open-mindedness that she did not have.
And it's really interesting, on your side of the literary equation, creative writing side, it's even more important. People always talk about it, but I think it's true on journalism side, the empathy to understand human behavior and where the story is and the motivations and following those threads the right way. So that was really interesting. You didn't just give us someone who was kind of a fully developed journalist. You gave us someone who's kind of battling, as you said, her own demons, which are hindering her ability to do her job to some degree.
Yeah, it's true. You pointed out correctly. It is empathy that she's not lacking. She's just lacking it towards these people, I think.
Yeah, selective empathy.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was really interesting. You also touched on the poverty element and kind of those class distinctions that you get into in the book, where sometimes you're born a certain way, and it seems like in this town in particular, people don't want to let you forget it.
Yes, well, she is from the wrong side of the tracks, I guess you could say. And the guy that she is dating and the girl that she is friends with, they are from the rich families. Of course, it was gonna go wrong in some way, at least, even if she hadn't left. It would not have been just like smooth sailing, marry your high school sweetheart, and nobody would have let her do that. And she does have a point at being mad about that. It's just she let it completely obscure. She let the anger obscure her view of everything. And she had to learn to let go.
And it was interesting, too, because you really gave us perspective on how generational wealth, or the absence of it, can really inform your social position in small towns. And there's long memories of what people have done in the past and how everyone should perceive them and their offspring because of that. Is that something that you noticed as you've moved into small towns yourself, or is that just something that came from the creative side?
No, it's not just small town. I have noticed this my whole life. Well, that is painful a bit to get into, but those are the best conversations, right? So I grew up kind of, well, I was an immigrant here. I'm a child of immigrants. We lived in the super poor part of town. We were super poor. And of course, I went on scholarship to a private school. So
it is interesting, though, how people have judgments, and sometimes we're making them and we don't even realize that we are. And my heart goes out to you, because that is not easy, to go to a new country and integrate into a whole new world. But the beauty in that, as much difficulty as there in it, I'm sure there was a lot of beauty in it, because it probably, when we talk about having empathy as a writer and being able to see people in different ways, it probably opened your mind up, I'm guessing, in ways that maybe other folks who just get up every day and are born into a certain world and just keep following in the tracks that were laid out before them maybe never get a chance to do.
yeah, of course, but let's just say that Stephanie's chip on the shoulder, I did not make that up out of nothing.
Okay,
Yeah,
so there was the ability for the author to relate a lot to their
a little bit.
protagonist.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Well, that is a good thing, because she's a very, very powerful protagonist, a very strong
Thank you.
female. And I loved how you looked at women's generational roles and really dug out, some of the women. You're giving us two timelines, first of all. And some of the women in the current timeline are kind of owning and living their lives in ways that women from prior timelines, and especially those who were the older generation in those prior timelines, really didn't have that kind of command and control and resource over their own destinies.
Yes, well, that's the thing with rural Quebec in those years. That's really how it was. It was a little bit behind, and it was just past the baby boom, but those ideals were still very much there. The church rules the town, and there's a lot of judgment and social opprobrium for failing to follow the rules and the pre-assigned path.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about was, again, that difference between the big city and the small towns. It seems to me like there is a place where in the big city, you have a lot of opportunity for anonymity. You can go into your grocery store and really never see anybody that you know sometimes. And if you don't want to go to that grocery store, heck, there's probably 5 others within a 10 to 15 mile drive that you could go to. So anonymity is something that you can enjoy when you're living in a big city. But it seems to me that you also sacrifice those strong ties of community that you can have in a small town. And I saw where that you kind of touched on that and teased it in different ways as Stephanie's going through this journey. Was that something for you that you've dealt with too, going from the anonymity of a big city background into the tight community of a small town?
Well, I've observed it's not quite what I suppose it used to be in the decades past, because life is very different now. We have this little something. Everybody just sits in their house on their phone all day. So there is a bit less, but still there is a bit of a sense of more of a human kind of connection, I guess. Like, yeah, I do have like neighbors. Oh, you want me to babysit? Okay.
Another big thing about this book, which I absolutely loved, were the secrets upon secrets upon secrets. What is your process for creating all of those layers and tying them together? Because it wasn't just secrets germane to the actual plot of the mystery. You also had other secrets that you were teasing out.
Well, I start usually with one particular scene or image. Well, I started with the Laura and Stephanie mother-daughter relationship, and I kind of spun out from there. There was so much material already, a lot to work with. It was tremendously satisfying, and it's one of the most painful scenes that I found to write. You mentioned the whole generational relationships and generational trauma. The worst scene to write for me was Laura's interaction with her parents. It was the worst. I put it off until the last. It was quite difficult. But all the other relationships, the high school sweetheart, the friend, I kind of just I had my brainstorming session, and it just kind of all like unfolded like a beautiful flower. Okay, and this character does this, and this character is related, and this is their role in the story, in the broader plot, and in the B plot. And it's the best feeling. Every writer will tell you it's a wonderful feeling when it just like comes together by itself. You just have to keep writing down.
Well, one of the things I loved was those dual time frames, because in the prior time frame, Laura, the mother, is really kind of the protagonist telling us that part of the story. And there's so many times where we have perceptions of our parents or older generation family members, and our perceptions are informed by our experience with them, but that's not the sum total of their whole life, and it may not even be the part of their life that has most shaped them. Many times as kids, we don't ever get the chance to know what really shaped them. They'll tell us stories here and there, but those are usually curated stories. Was it great to have that opportunity to go beyond your protagonist one generation up and to be able to tell that story as hard as it was?
Well, kids in general, we tend to reduce our parents to this image, good or bad, but quite reductive, a caricature almost of a person. And often there isn't interest about what they're actually like until, unfortunately, it's too late. And I loved exploring that aspect. For me, I've said this before, and it's no secret, Laura, for me, she stole the show. It was my favorite arc to write. I loved writing her scenes so much. I really got to inhabit her mind as a teenager, and it was a really interesting experience because obviously I was not a teenager in rural Quebec in those years. So it was a bit of research, but also a very fun experience.
Well, I absolutely loved it because number one, you put us back in a time frame that was so different, but it was so relatable, all of it. And it just, oh, I'm with you. I absolutely love Laura.
Somebody suggested if there was a movie adaptation that should be played by Amy Adams, and I am so here for that. It would be
Oh,
amazing, wouldn't it?
oh my God. I would love to see that. Absolutely love to see it because she is a character who, as you pointed out, no spoiler, just that opening scene, she doesn't show up to pick her daughter up when she needs to. And it so much informs that perspective that Stephanie tells us of who her mother is. She's telling us this story in a different way than Stephanie can tell it. Why did you decide to have those two perspectives, those two characters telling us the story?
Because you can't have one without the other. We need that perspective because Stephanie is, in spite of herself, an unreliable narrator. She can see things that are right in front of her because of her the way that she sees her hometown. And Laura is, I guess, the perspective it's not so much realistic, but it's a different side of cynicism. She really got the short end of the stick there. And she is the person that she is because of that.
Through Laura, she makes the reader question one of those age old questions that we all ask ourselves: are secrets good or are secrets bad? And by that, I don't mean the nature of each individual one. I mean, do you think it's good for us to keep secrets? Or do you think we should be an open book?
Well, secrets, they have this ability to surface at the worst possible time. I am all for not telling people hurtful things that they don't want to hear when you can, but it can kind of blow up in your face, I guess. And in this case, secrets, it all started. It's not, I'm going to keep it spoiler free. It started because the town decided to keep something a secret that could have been addressed and maybe even fixed. And the whole thing could have been averted if they could just face this one thing, but that they were so determined to not accept and not even confront and not even acknowledge. And that really, you can see how that it went on to blow up in everybody's faces in 2017, many years after the fact.
And what's fascinating is it seems to me like that was a very common thing for prior generations, that if something happened and it was uncomfortable, or it felt odd, or it didn't conform to social norms in whatever way, that everyone wanted to hide it. It seems like we're getting better slowly as a species at saying, okay, well, we don't have to hide everything. Not everything's horrible. And in fact, some things we are better for sharing. And one of those things, I think, is medicine. You know, sometimes there's someone gets a diagnosis and realizes, oh, these symptoms mean that, and then they can share it with someone else in their family, and that person is better off for the information.
Yes, of course, especially generational things like that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I am certain, with all of the fans that exist, that they are hanging on every new book that you have that's coming out, as I will be from this point going forward. Where is the best place for existing fans and new fans to find you, Nina?
Well, I am on the platform formerly known as Twitter. I am Nina Laurin Books, and I'm on Instagram as Nina Laurin. And I have a website, ninalaurin.com, that I need to get up to date. And I do have a book actually coming out in April, and that one is about a ballet school, and it stars the absolute worst ballet mom that you can possibly imagine. It should be fun.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait. I'm putting it on my list right now.
Yes, it's called The Shadow Girls. It's a reference to the ballet being danced in the book.
Awesome. Absolutely awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Nina. Again, the book is The Last Thing She Saw.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
And thank you all for joining us on this episode of Twisted Passages. We hope to see you next time.